uh, test. Yeah, we're gonna be testing today. If nothing else, it's gonna be about testing if internet works or if it dies, if it fucking decides to die. Uh, what does it look like so far? Stable. Will it remain? We have 8 minutes. Will it remain stable? Those entire 8 minutes. What a good question. Something tells me that it might not. And you might ask yourself, how do you know? What a great question. First time ever. First, what's the expression? First rodeo ever in my life. So yeah, I have no clue what I'm saying actually. Uh, drop frames. 0. So far, 0. I'm going to crash out so fucking hard if it does not work actually. At this point, it doesn't even make sense. Why did it? Why does it work in the morning, but not at night? What's the problem? What's the situation? Copy. We copy everything. Copy this, paste this, omit this, activate this. There we go. What's up? So far, 0. So far, 0%. Will it actually not crash? Will it actually survive? Or will it actually explode? What a good question. What a wonderful question. Plus Twitch. There we go. I don't even know why it. Why will it? Why will it work? Which reason does it have to work? So real, so true, so correct out. That is. Never say never. No, not that actually, but also never say never. Always say never. Wow, inspirational. We have everything in place. This should, for no reason whatsoever, crash. Like, literally, no reason to crash. How are we doing so far? 0% dropped frames. Stop recording! What are you doing? Anyways, bitrate. We have 4100 kilobytes per second. Okay. That much works for some reason. Like, there is no need to add anything else. Anyways, I feel like I am losing it. Like, do you know when you are under such high loads of stress that you feel like you're about to explode? When that very same sentiment, but because I don't even the stress is caused by me not being capable of understanding why it decides to lag for some reason. How are we doing? It's still like amazing. So amazing. So absolutely amazing. No, no, it's lagging. It's lagging. It's it didn't entirely lag. Okay, okay. Didn't entirely lag. But it did lag anyways, so what's up with that? Hate? Let me tell you about hate. With every single inch of my being, with every single fiber of myself, have encountered that I was indeed filled by that spirit of hatred over that which chose to not work. Over that which, for some reason, remains not just an accessible and functional, non-cooperative, non-usable is. My God, why? With existence like this, what did I do to deserve this punishment? It's not really a punishment, but I don't know. It does feel bad to know that it just doesn't work for some reason. Like, why does it not work? What a wonderful question. No explanation whatsoever. It just chooses not to work. And that's it. Wow. So meaningful. Thank you so much for this piece of information. Well, okay. I am going to assume that it is not going to crash for any reason. Like, yeah, it's gonna be fine, supposedly. For sure, it's gonna be fine. And if it lags, I'm crashing out, brother. I'm crashing out so hard. If it decides to lag, then what do we do about that? What do we do about that situation? If it does happen, if things just go like that, in that direction, huh? Is there anything to actually do? Not really. We should just live comfortably with the results, I guess. But, anyways. Implying that it won't lag. You know, we are back after a handful of days. Uh, I think this time I wasn't really even expecting to lag so bad, so much for so long either. But it can happen whenever it happens, and there is nothing that you can do to actively avoid it. Eh, it's an understandable process, I guess. Something that just occurs, something that just is. And yeah, uh, this time around, we missed like half a week or so since the last time that we have been here, uh, for real, with these issues. So yeah, we will see. Besides that, it's I want to say, well, I it's nice to be. The issue is, I don't know, it doesn't feel calm itself. I don't feel like I am chill right now. I am more than anything else trying to pay attention to see if it lags, if it decides to, for some random reason, stop working or something. I I am quite heavily looking towards this information, and I don't know. It's we're gonna see what happens basically. Maybe it works. Maybe if it doesn't work, I don't really know. I don't really have a second plan if it doesn't work. But yeah, it is at least here we are. So point is, good morning. It has been a good handful of days. Welcome, and today we're gonna. I don't really have much to say. I don't really feel like I have anything to add. Like, a priori, there is nothing to truly give besides the same information that we followed today. I feel like we're now doing something far more chill. I considerations have led me to the conclusion that we can very much today particularly enjoy the possibility, the route of simply trying to see what happens and trying to see what we can conclude. There are there are a lot of options and there are always a lot of ideas and not always the most important conclusion is not always is it necessary to be playing something, and in the end, yeah, it's quite substantial to actually have the possibility of just looking around and saying, okay, I have gathered all these hypotheses, I guess, and I have analyzed all these ideas, and now I can present this piece to you. I don't think exactly that it is just a piece. It's something that operates also along the lines of, okay, I have observed well enough many other sides of reality, and I think that I can distill basically this piece of it from all these different parts of life, because my my approach particularly to this feels along the lines of, it very much seems to be the case that, yeah, there are there are some things that I feel like in the, what topics are we gonna be talking about today? As title is what dictates what we're gonna be talking about, problems and drama. So yeah, inside of all of that, there is always a huge margin for way too many sides of reality itself, which can contain them, so to speak. Being more specific, the realization that indeed there are more conceptions and more ways to understand this very same group of ideas than there are understandable ways to describe them, so to speak. Like, the more you try to deepen, not every single idea works like that, but the more you try to deepen, particularly into these ones, it is that you finally get to realize, indeed, there are all these other aspects and there are all these other sides to the notion itself, which I have grown interested in and such, and this pretty much falls under that category of, wow, surprisingly enough, there are more than a handful of things to actually think about when it comes to that. So yeah, after having gotten, for one reason or another, the opportunity to do that very same work, I think today, yeah, I have something to actually say. Not particularly today. I had it since last time that we tried, and the problems can arise. I I don't really have anything to say in regards to that. It's not, I don't know. I am happy that we get to be here, as I said before, but I would have also been happy to continue the last time we tried. So yeah. Anyways, the real point is the main topic of discussion, not any of those other sentiments, I guess. So yeah. Now, properly starting. I know I tried to do an introduction before to the whole prologue of what brings forward the idea itself of why to analyze problems. At this point I have forgotten. At least I can give you the essence of the idea now, which still is the most important thing. Like, I don't think sometimes the prologue, the explanation as to why one ends up thinking out the things that they do possesses more than enough importance, more than enough value to say, wow, this indeed is something that I am happy I have gathered. This is indeed something that I have encountered. Gives me some kind of benefit, gives me some kind of possibility, allows me to have some sort of something. And in itself, mostly so, with anything that has to do with philosophy, to be capable of gathering out of those precedents to say, yeah, okay, all of this happened before this final conclusion started to be developed and whatnot. Sometimes it's useful, sometimes it really doesn't change the outcome or doesn't really give you a better insight into what you're trying to listen to. So yeah, I don't, today particularly, I don't feel like there is anything of that sort to try to add. If there was, I already forgot about that, so we can assume that it lost its importance. Also, I like how the subtitles became literally question marks. Uh, why did they become question marks? What happened? Anyways, yeah. No, for real. So, in life itself, let me properly present it. In life itself, there is something always interesting, that is to realize that there are so many aspects to what we always possess an interest on, and the thing that matters particularly is how there are always arising conflicts. The specific word itself is problems, but as always, to avoid repetitiveness and whatnot, you might encounter that I simply utilize 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 different ways to name the same thing. The main concept always is problem. Excuse me if I simply think around how I refer to problems, and basically all of that later on, implying that I do. But the point is, in the situations of existence that most people are bound to encounter, there is something naturally present that is also included unavoidably, and that is the situation of the problems themselves. And there is, within that category, there is something that feels rather lacking, so to speak, rather absent, and that is first and foremost the realization of this universality of the problematics of existence. There is, I remember a particular paragraph or so that I read that went along the lines of, the person can very easily forget about the situations which have affected others, which are very much similar to what they too are also experiencing, and not in the sense of I am incapable of ever knowing that they are out there, but rather an important word, because of my egoism, I find myself believing that the situations which make me suffer, so to speak, are exclusive to me and have never and will never occur again. I am the whole conception of me as a human being. I tend to think about the problems that exist and the problems that plague my life as things that are bound to be always personalized to some degree, even you could say, and it always feels strange when you listen about that, when you hear about that, you always have the strange sensation of it doesn't really feel like it is absolutely correct. It doesn't really feel like it is absolutely right. There is in most of the literature, what you're gonna find is people forget that their problems correspond to the universal dynamics of existence in a way in which they therefore avoid and wall up themselves from the rest of reality, something very much related to how in a very specific word would be as a defense mechanism, I would assume that I am seeing my problems only as mine and that no other answer will be capable of solving for me what is right now a situation which makes me in any way suffer whatsoever. And the, the absent part is, but exactly what is the thing that causes it? I I have tried to understand it. I don't think so far I truly possess even an actual, completely accurate cognition, understanding about what is the thing that actually makes it to be the case. But for sure I can say, after having tried to pay some attention to it, it doesn't have much to do simply with, yeah, my condition as a human being in the post-modern era, in this strange world, in this very same present, in, I don't know, in the year 2026 or 2027 or whatever, that's exactly what makes me believe that my problem is only mine, or something even more. My individualistic society is what leads me to also assume that my problems are exclusively mine and that there is no other way to talk about them but to assume all of those situations, all of those encounters are charged exactly with exclusively the tendency which is unique to me, basically. In the realization of I, by trying to understand what the problems themselves are, I do not really see any kind of exact answer in what at other times on or when somebody else simply describes it, like not when simply describes it, when somebody almost trying to ignore the topic tells you, yeah, people are going to be bound to finding that their problems are unique to themselves and their conditions and whatnot. Okay, but exactly what causes that? That question is avoided, and that whole aspect of the understanding of the problems themselves end up being disregarded, completely thrown away, and seen as something unnecessary, something that doesn't really need to be thought about in any way, in any manner, a perspective which lets you feel like, indeed, there might be a possible explanation. But we don't really have to consider what makes this thing be. We the current approach, let's say like this, the current approach nowadays goes very much along the lines of, yeah, you have to kill your ego and you have to kill your problems of personality and you have to kill the way in which you assume you exist in this world and you are given the possibility of being and whatnot, and you need to be capable of dealing with all of those loads, with all of those charges, so that you can then finally realize that, indeed, just as I encounter my own situation, others have also done so before, and not to go so directly into the whole explanation of it, but basically the whole notion of you get to purify yourself from the very much sacrilegious act of believing in your uniqueness and your specialty and specific value in the universe, so that you can therefore finally acquire the universal realization that indeed the things that you see pertain only to not only to you but also to the whole of humanity at some other point, and that by acquiring the very same knowledge that others did, you can finally then transcend and abandon those very same problems without, once again, without ever even trying to address the reason as to why they existed. And I don't know, I don't think it is entirely, not, I wouldn't say meaningless, but rather ineffective. I don't think it is entirely incapable of working out. There is, to some degree, it is why it is the most normal reason as to why this is the case. The desire to say, yeah, you don't have to look why this became such. You can only look forward. You can only look from here on out onto the future. What you need to be trying to do to solve any existent problem in your life, basically. The desire to reduce everything to almost a strange soup of, okay, what matters right now is only what you can do. Oh, dear Lord, and what you must prioritize in order to never again encounter these very same dire situations, and how, oh, all gracious existence of this beautiful world of ours, how you might never again have to fail prey to such energies, to such malevolent sways of mind and whatnot, and almost, unavoidably, I'm making to some degree a regularization out of that, but yeah, the more realistic, even the more realistic ways in which it is depicted carry with it a significance, an imagery of, oh wow, yeah, you are only doing wrong in trying to understand why this happened. You need to know simply that things can change, and there is a detachment, you could even say it like that, I guess, a desire to detach the problem from the person in a way in which the problem doesn't belong to you anymore. The problem is just a problem that everyone also had, and the problem. The funny thing is, I guess, I haven't really characterized it in any way because, yeah, I'm not really talking about any the genetic problems which all people might as well have. Like, I don't know, you want to put any name into it, you can, but I try to not do so because it is quite pointless, basically. And the reality is then that, yeah, once you finally get then to observe, okay, the problems themselves carry with them these meanings, these implications, these aspects to it, and after I finally get to observe what all of that means, after I finally get to try to decipher what all of that encompasses, I can just remove the problem from life, not from my life also, but from life. If it were to happen, I could even do so from other people who have seen that indeed problems had arisen in their existences, and the universality, like the carried promise of once you get to solve your problems, you can also finally go out there and solve the problems of others. To some degree, even, I mean, it's not a promise, but also like the heavy weight of you need to realize that you get to fix yourself. Okay, brother, now you have to go and help other people. Okay, it's time for you to do your charitable duty in this existence, in this world, and make sure that other people are also then solving their problems. You have no more problems, then your new problem becomes to make sure that others can also find themselves. The terminology isn't exactly enlightened, but it is very much that. The way in which we refer to those things can't avoid but to exist in that very same terminology of yeah, we we will not exactly call it such a thing because in the end, what do we actually gain from doing so? What do we actually get if we decide to admit that this has to do with some spiritual way of communicating, of thinking about these things? It can, and it very much has always the possibility of being observed as such, but at the very same time, even if it does, even if it carries with it that very same meaning, it doesn't mean that it needs to. It doesn't mean that you should be at all interested in thinking about it like that. Nor the real problem with modern society, nor that we're even willing to declare it as such, a spirituality hidden within so many other layers of reality, because in the end, the whole aspect of how we are slowly evolving into more rational, understandable beings, like something that I remember having heard very recently was finally getting to advance it emotionally to be capable of materializing into the rational and into the correct objective view of situations, to be capable of living a more freeing life. Something about detaching yourself from what makes you be you, basically. And all of those methods and all of those analyses which try to conclude that indeed you don't really have to care about what you are, you only need to be interested in solving the things themselves. But point being, basically, because all of this happens, then, and unavoidably, you might as well then find yourself interested in trying to understand, okay, so what does any of that mean? What is the quote unquote right choice? What is not, I don't think it is exactly the right choice, but simply the aspect of, okay, how do I try? If we are saying that before you got to abandon the root of the problem itself for the sake of trying to solve it from a more, as you might hear about it, an objective viewpoint. I don't think it is objective at all, but by detaching the problem, by losing interest in trying to make sense as to why it happened to you, you finally get to not have to worry about your individuality. You get to not have to think about what it means for you to be suffering things yourself, you know? You get to not have to be you. You get to dissociate from your own condition of person in order to be, be capable of finally acquiring, absorbing that essence which others do contain within themselves, do possess within themselves, that embodies and imbibes the reality of, okay, I I see that I myself am finally not so incapable of enjoying what I do. I see that I am not so incapable of finally saying, indeed, if my goals become these things, if my interest, my willfulness becomes this thing, I can also understand what I am actually trying to obtain, what I am actually trying to go for and such. But in the equation in which you get to erase yourself from the very same equation itself, where you don't play a role in what your problem is, basically, no condition which creates the problem is deserving of any kind of understanding from your perspective, it's very easy to see. I wasn't really aware of that, but yeah, it's very much a theory of power and control. I think at some point, I don't really like to talk about that because, as always, you cannot talk about manipulation without feeling like unavoidably manipulation itself possesses an incredibly bad connotation in the public speech. But yeah, in this case, it does fall under the category of okay, you try to understand what you are, you try to understand what you try to do, what are the problems that characterize your existence, and at that instant, then you realize something quite interesting. Isn't it quite tragic that in itself you are quite incapable of possessing anything that is of your own, that is in itself capable of reassuring, confirming that you do have these situations, you do have these things, which you are willing to say, they are affecting me, not only. I am happy to say that other things are similar enough, like, I am willing to say that the problems are not exactly only mine, but not every single one of them possesses this quality. Some of those problems, when I try to compare them to what other people have described before, don't really have the exact same energy behind them. I can realize that indeed I don't have to suffer so much by myself, but I don't really get to pleasure myself with an idea, a supposition of, an assumption of, okay, indeed, I will be capable of fixing it exactly in the same way as before. And I don't really, I don't really want to disparage so much about why this is bad or good or why it needs to be fixed in any way or whatever. The point itself, the main idea, anyways, is okay, I get to realize that this is so. I get to realize that I cannot even be allowed to appropriate of my own problems for the sake of not. The easy way in which they always describe it, yeah, the way in which you can find it characterized whenever you have to read about it and whatnot, the the common problem, the common situation that is in itself negative when you have to think about why should you be at all interested in not letting people talk out their problems as if they were their own is you don't get to characterize yourself by the things that make you unhappy, because somehow you are going to be incapable of actually understanding that what makes you unhappy is not you. Like this magical equation of because I tend to think so much about this thing, I somehow become this thing itself. Like the biggest problem. I am trying to avoid it. You will actually hear it with the best example. I don't need to exactly go around it in any manner. The biggest problem always present in all of that is you cannot talk about depression as if it was a problem of your own. You cannot talk about sadness as if it was a problem of your own. The moment in which you allow yourself to do something of these qualities, the moment in which you also generate within yourself the possibility of embodying that sentiment and embodying that grief, that distressing emotion, sensation, and everything. I don't think that I am going through a depressive phase. I believe that I am depressed, and I believe that I am sadness itself manifested almost into a person, and that desire to generate a picture in which you are no more yourself, but rather you become the problem. An equation in which the person slowly strips away from themselves in the desire to characterize yourself as this unique entity with its unique problems. You get absorbed by the problems themselves, and the characterizations that you generate get even more so imbibed in the energy of the problems than anything else. You don't really think about what makes you be so happy, what makes you be so glad, so capable of saying that you enjoy being and whatnot. You only encounter, think, and picture the problems that make you be who you are. So, for the sake of all of that, you do not have the right, you do not deserve to think out the problems that you have as your own. Once again, the summary becomes then that, yeah, there are problems, but you don't talk about the problems that you have as if they were yours, because you might as well end up damaging yourself simply. From which perspective, does it even matter? You will end up doing so anyways. The problem is that you won't really realize exactly how. You just know that you're going to do so, and whenever that happens, it might as well be too late for you to finally get to change, basically. And okay, enough about the aspect of why the problems themselves are not discussed. Now, let me actually go into what I wanted to talk about. Because this is so, then something that I feel like is far more necessary is once again, the reevaluation of, okay, but is it truly not worth to try to do? To try to talk about the problems themselves as things that at some point started to exist? I wasn't always sad. I wasn't always angry. I wasn't always capable of being easily irritated. I wasn't always so impatient. I wasn't always the problem that I have right now, you know? By being capable of putting things into this timeline that has been my own existence, by utilizing this beautiful capacity that is my own memory, I can finally go back and look into all the things that do exist and say, okay, indeed, right now, I have this problem, but it wasn't always the case. And even if it feels like it has plagued my whole existence, as long as I can identify the moment in which it started to be so, I can start to also do the proper work of saying, of picturing, of deciphering. How do we actually try to look at this thing as not just my problem, but rather the problem which I am being affected by? I understand the perspective, the desire to say that this is not my problem, but I can also understand that there is a reason as to why it originated, there is a reason as to why it appeared, there is a moment in time, there is something that I can point at, and the most... Calm down. The necessary step is unavoidably to be capable of saying, okay, yeah, there is something that exists here. I don't really get to know exactly what it is, but by evaluating what I do have right now, I can then progress into a more proper analysis of, then, was this manifested at this point in time? Was this created, brought forward by all these other things? Or am I actually ignoring when it did so, when it did become true, when it did arrive into my life, basically? By having the possibility of evaluating all of that, it is the freeing process of seeing finally, and sometimes I can actually pinpoint when maybe not with the utmost highest degree of exactitude. I am not the most correct person whenever it comes to myself. I have 1,000 layers of situations which I have to unravel and decipher and be capable of putting into proper words before I can finally stimulate that very same emotion, that very same sensation. And whenever all of that is the case, whenever all of those things do happen to feel like that, I am not angered by the necessity to having to do such a thing. I just know that I get to do it, and I might as well succeed in doing so. It's just by discarding the entirety of the reason as to why this problem ever appeared, I don't really know if tomorrow I will have the possibility of knowing if I did get rid of the problem or if I only got rid of the symptoms itself. That's the point that I am trying to reach here. I love the interest for solving things, but I don't really have so much of a hope when the way in which you approach things becomes, yeah, you know what, it doesn't matter. Your problems are not yours. The things that are affecting you don't have so much of an importance. There is, you could even say it like this, in so much of a culture that seems to be so advocated to a huge degree of individualism, there is such a degree to disregard the individuality of the people in itself in a way in which it is actually useful in any manner. The things that happen to you don't matter. The things that you go through don't really have any substance, don't really have any power on your life. The things that you are capable of, even, that's the thing that I don't like, actually. Sometimes the whole realization of sometimes I can exactly say what is affecting me, exactly look at what is having a degree of influence in my being, and by having this very same possibility exist and making usage of that possibility, it is that I can finally admit that I am enjoying doing something in itself. I am not so happy when I become entirely ignorant of all of those factors. I am not so fulfilled when I let go of all of that. I am not so capable of saying that life itself gives me something of value when what makes me be me loses all that substance which I require otherwise to identify what I am. And this, the very same reinstatement of, okay, yeah, then maybe actually we can try to do something along these lines. Maybe it's dangerous, but every single part of life is fucking dangerous in the end. Isn't it all in some degree, in some capacity, in some way, in some manner, because of some reason or other, something that can, in the very end, lead to dangerous things, lead to regrets, lead to things that you might as well deal without? Doesn't everything carry some degree of risk? Isn't it more useful to finally say, okay, yeah, then at least you sometimes do deserve to try. You deserve to actually understand why things are the way they are. Not the treatment of the person, not as if you truly are yourself, but rather as if you have yet again become yet another cog in the machine which possesses no substance, no value, and no need to be understood from the perspective that you might have about yourself. If the problem is yours or not doesn't matter. If the problem that you have seen affects you in this one way or not is the case or not has no substance. What does matter, what does carry some degree of significance is instead this other thing, this solution that we can offer and this way to go about it in which the problem disappears, and now no more anybody has to worry about that. It's the way in which we were capable of understanding something about microbiology itself, about single-celled organisms, and about Most importantly, anything that has to do with a virus, with a bacteria, with such things, anything that causes illnesses in themselves, diseases, trying to transfer that very same quality into far more fundamental aspects of the human essence. You don't have a problem. You don't have anything that affects you. You have just encountered yet another seed, yet another variant of this universal problem. Not always it is the case. Not it would have been so wonderful if it actually was. It would have been so much more cherishable, so much more valuable if it actually did work in that way, if it actually did function along these lines. But the substance itself of the thing becomes that it rather doesn't work like that. It rather doesn't give you that pleasure. It rather doesn't allow you to feel that. You do not get to actually believe that things have no substance whatsoever for anyone else, no other subject of value, no other thing which matters. The issue is my problem is not anymore mine. My problem does not need to be understood as something that I can actually deal with. The solution is always going to be found out there, and the solution is always going to be found in the things that all the other rest of the society, the world, my community, or whatever has encountered. And in itself, the problem becomes when a situation arises which gives the person the necessity to finally evaluate, okay, I don't really see that many similarities amongst what I am actually living and what I believe others might also be living. I don't really feel like there is that much of an actual equalness. I don't really feel like at all I am going through the exact same thing that others have tried to describe to me. I am quite sure. I don't want to make it look like I am happy, but I am quite capable of seeing, of feeling, of realizing, indeed, this thing isn't mine only. It is something that might have happened to others, but I don't really encounter a solution for it in these great encyclopedias of suffering, these great, so many books that try to talk about the situations that others also went through. In none of those places I can actually encounter something capable in itself of truly giving me the break that I am desiring, the moments of calmness, and the solution that I am trying to actually identify. I know that there has to be something like that. There has to exist something of this sort. But I don't know. I try and I keep on making sure that I put everything forward out of myself to identify it. But I don't encounter anything that does actually seem to, because my problem isn't just my problem, get rid of it. It's the necessity even. It's the problem is we cannot talk out things as necessary. What is actually necessary? Welcome to Philosophy 101, where nothing is actually necessary besides the three most basic things, aka eating, resting, and moving around to not rot away. But yeah, it's also in those very same beliefs that it becomes clouded the decision of, okay, then can we say that it truly is necessary therefore also to adhere only to an ideal of every single problem is never mind, every single problem is solvable by the universal ways, so to speak, I don't really feel like it is the case. I don't really have the sensation that it does work in that way. I don't encounter within myself that sensation, within my hopes, within my goals, anything of that sort. I can identify many more things, but it doesn't get to feel like it truly just gets to not be anymore, because I get rid of the I in the equation, so to speak, you know? And I don't know, it's difficult anyways. I say it as if it was easy. I tried to present that before, but yeah, it's difficult to properly say out of those other things. Like, but do you actually understand what it means to try to make sure that you get to discover what the problem is? Where did it appear on? How did it manifest itself, so to speak? What could have caused any of those things? Like, that is, to some degree, as always, that is most of what psychology tries to talk about. That is what most of the fields of knowledge of that sort try to deepen in any way. Can you truly say, can you truly get to decipher how these things are yours, how these things came to be easily? Not really. There are so many more tries to take, so many more days to waste in order to try to clarify, to finally make sense out of what is happening, out of what is being the case, out of what is the thing that is affecting you and all of that. But it doesn't really feel that bad. I don't. The idea becomes, okay, you don't need to think about that. You don't need to at all worry about why this might happen. You only need to worry, you only need to have in mind that indeed this is affecting you without anything else. And all of that seems so strange, all of that becomes so meaningless. At that point, yeah, I can actually utilize the word meaningless in terms of why would you truly need to ignore that place? Why would we really need to ignore the origin of something? How? If I strip away from you the possibility of understanding what was the causal reason for this thing, can you truly say that you understand how it got to be solved? How? This whole equation of I try to assume that you are me. Do I feel like I understand things when I don't even understand why they happened, so I don't even understand why they also ceased in action? Isn't it amazing that out of nowhere, when it comes to the realm of personal situations, you don't deserve to know? You don't have the right to understand why this is the case? It's... Let me try to find an example of this. Me, as somebody who is actually capable of feeling minimally well or not, and me as this thing which does carry with itself its own feelings, don't I actually want to understand when something changes, so that if it does change, I at least have an explanation as to why this was the case? How can I therefore say, even more when the change itself becomes something negative, when we can finally categorize these changes as problematic, as troublesome, and such? When this happens, now I don't really want to know anymore? I sometimes I can say I suffer, but do I suffer enough to not want to at all understand the reasons as to why it is that I was suffering? If it gets to cease, am I always in the worst of the positions to try to talk about this later on to say, ah, yeah, I am happy that I actually get to understand why this was the case. It's an approach to health, an idea of wellness, I guess. An idea of wellness in which anything that is not exactly wellness is extremely bad. Like, you don't really have to worry about what you are feeling as a problem. You don't really have to worry about what caused the problem. You don't really have to worry about what brought forward this situation. You only need to be interested in solving it. You only need to be interested in making sure that this stops existing, nothing else. You need to have any degree of interest in knowing why this happens, why this is. You only need to make sure that this ceases being, simply put, that this stops affecting you. You're going back to the reductionism of the person. If this keeps affecting you, you're going to do something so incredibly bad, so utterly damaging to yourself. You're only going to regret what you choose, what you go for, what you decide to do and such. There is never anything that you will actually do that will be something that you're going to be happy for if it isn't to aim for the solution. So, get rid of everything that isn't aiming for a solution. And even if it isn't exactly not aiming for the solution, as long as it isn't directly striving towards the solution itself of the problem, you might as well also not engage with that. And I don't know. I feel like sometimes my main point on Aweda, I guess at this point is clear enough. Problems can actually be quite special in themselves. Sometimes it's something wonderful about the knowledge of humanity. No matter how many people you actually get to know, sometimes you might actually just find yourself in the right enough situation to not have the capacity to say, what others can actually tell me helps in the solution of this problem. What others actually give me can actually assist in the elimination of this negative thing. What others are actually capable of showing me can indeed make sure that I have no more to deal with the problem. No, not at all really. But if it did matter, if it did have any role in all of this, we will be more willing to say all of that. While in reality, we don't really have that exist nowadays. We don't really talk about it like that. My main point once again was that, yeah, we know it exists, we know it should have some degree of importance, but you don't really see it mentioned as such. You don't really hear or once again listen and view out there that, yeah, indeed, sometimes it's actually valid to try to have an interest in what is your situation as your own. You don't really need to look for that. You only need to get rid of it. And I don't know. I guess it's annoying. It's way too annoying. But we're not done. There is. Let me drink some water. There is a second layer. The problem is, I don't really know if we're going to actually have the internet to get to that, taking into consideration that it has been lying for some reason now, and it doesn't even seem like it is going to actually stop. But yeah, let's try, I guess. Okay, we got to deal with one of the problems, so, or with one of the topics, I guess. Shall we take a tiny break to try to see if it actually gets to fix itself? Like, will it even fix itself? What a wonderful question. It doesn't really seem to be the case. It only seems to be lying, so I don't know. Well, patience, I guess. Maybe? I don't know. I guess I can... Something about... Okay. It's a bad comparison, because I know that it is pulling on a far more serious topic, but yeah. Do you know when you have a family member who is an addict of sorts? One of the main ideas that comes with that is having an addicted family member is or equals to going through the process of loss through life while they are still alive themselves. Not only when they died, but the slow withering of their existence as they try to recover. Okay, it can be used in the same scenario. Internet not working. So yeah, I don't know. I guess we can only be happy that we got to say one thing. But the other one might as well be saved for the next time, I guess. Taking into consideration that it doesn't seem to be working anyways, we are good enough, I guess. But yeah, point is, at least, I guess, yeah. Thank you for everything. I don't know, I wanted to, I love how, do I want to stream? I do. Do I get to stream? I don't. Okay, whatever. So, we are gonna be calling it a day, I guess, for whichever reason doesn't want to work. So, yeah, we are gonna be calling it short. Anyways, we got to at least talk one thing. I'm happy that I did at least get to stream a bit before it actually started to crash again. So yeah, not gonna get angry that it did fail this time around. So, anyways, was good enough basically, as always. Thanks for everything, for the time, the patience, the interest, the attention, TL. Remember to take care, to hydrate, to rest. And yeah, whenever we can, at this point it actually is whenever we can, actually. But yeah, whenever we can, we are getting back here. And I hope it gets to be soon enough. If it doesn't, what can we do about that, brother? What can we do about that, brother? But yeah, anyways, thank you. Have a good one, and yeah, as always, even if we don't get to see ourselves, remember to take care, remember to hydrate, remember to rest, all of that. For now, we can only say bye bye.